Concealed Wisconsin Podcast, Episode 8. Welcome to Concealed Wisconsin, a podcast about guns, Wisconsin, and you. In today's show, I'll get a chance to sit down with Michael Martin, the author of several books on concealed carry. He's an expert on the subject, and his books are excellent resources that I highly recommend for anyone looking to learn more about carrying a firearm for self-defense. My name is Andy, and I'm the host of Concealed Wisconsin, and I want to thank you for tuning in to today's show. I want to ask you a quick question. Have you gone over to Facebook yet and liked our show page? You can find it at facebook.com/Concealed Wisconsin. Show your support for the show by clicking the like button, and feel free to say hi, leave a question or a comment. And by the way, if you're not subscribed on YouTube as well, you can go to youtube.com/Concealed Wisconsin and check out our videos. I hope to hear from you online at some point in some place, but again, it's just an honor to have you as a listener to this show. In the last episode of Concealed Wisconsin, I vented a little bit because I hadn't gotten my concealed carry license from the Department of Justice. Well, I'm happy to say that has been remedied. On December 2nd, I received my license in the mail, exactly 30 days from when I sent the application in, and I've been carrying ever since. I won't say that I've gotten used to carrying a gun, but I don't think that one should ever get used to carrying, at least to the point where you say, I forgot that I had the gun on me. When you carry, you should always be in a state of alertness or awareness. You should be aware of your firearm and the others around you, which isn't usually an issue for me because that gun is poking me constantly in the side a lot. That's one reason, though, that people quit carrying because it isn't comfortable. They complain because it's a heavy gun or it's just not comfortable to carry around. And that's why you need to look at options for carry, different holsters, different types of guns, different size guns, things like that, because although it's not comfortable, it's not really supposed to be comfortable. It isn't comfortable, but that gun may save your life or the life of someone you love in the future. Now, if you're still waiting for your license like I was, I want you to encourage you to have a little bit of patience. The Department of Justice was overwhelmed with applications from all over Wisconsin. Over 50,000 applications came in almost immediately, and more keep pouring in daily. They're literally wading through the applications as fast as they can and trying to meet their deadline of 45 days. I was asked by a listener if they should call in to get an update, and my response was, well, there's really no use in calling down there because they aren't giving updates over the phone, at least not at this point. My advice was to just keep watching to see if your check clears and expect at least a 14-day wait from that point on. If you pass 45 days, you may want to call down there, but honestly, if they're late on your application, they're probably going to be late on several others, and they'll all be calling too. And the more calls they get takes away from the speed that they can process all those applications. And so I just encourage you to have patience and let them get through this initial stage. I think they were taken off guard by the amount of people that actually applied so quickly, which tells us a lot about the support for the Second Amendment inside of Wisconsin and how thirsty we were for being able to protect ourselves with a firearm, billy club, electric weapon, a knife, and a gun. And kudos to Governor Walker for finally getting that passed after 130-plus years of not being able to do so inside Wisconsin. Another reminder, if you're looking for information on Wisconsin's concealed carry law, training tips, gear, other ideas on guns, or the latest reciprocity information, be sure to check out concealedwisconsin.com. If you have a question or a comment or even a suggestion for the show, please call the feedback hotline and leave us a voicemail. Now, in the last episode of Concealed Wisconsin, I mentioned a woman who was arrested in Milwaukee for using the internet outside a closed business and having a concealed weapon without a firearm. As it turned out, she had the owner's permission to use the internet and according to her, she was openly carrying her firearm in accordance with Act 35, Wisconsin's new gun law. Now, after that episode, I was able to talk with this person. Her name is Krysta Sutterfield, and we had a chance to talk over the phone. And unfortunately, because the case is still pending and potentially going to trial, she declined an interview on the show. I think her lawyer would have had a heart attack if she would have come on the show. But she wanted to give an update on the case to me so that I could clear things up with you. And so I'm just going to read that. And I would encourage you to listen to this carefully and consider possibly even supporting her financially as she battles this charge. And here's why. Here's the update. Krysta was arrested for carrying a concealed weapon in her car back on November 11th. Krysta continues to maintain that her firearm was openly carried and not covered, but the police say it wasn't visible. It's a he said, she said argument. It's looking like this case will probably go to trial, and before that happens, there needs to be some determination of what the new law means by a judge. Now, this is important because the interpretation of this law will affect all open carriers, and it could become some sort of a case law to measure this open carry inside of a car for you if you choose not to get a license. The jury will only decide the he said, she said part of the officer claiming her coat was covering the pistol and her knowledge that it was not. Now, Krysta's legal fees have now increased due to the possibility of a jury trial. Currently, she's in need of about $7,000 to cover everything through the jury trial. And unfortunately, Krysta's ability to pay for these fees have been taken away by the judge, oddly enough, who will not allow Krysta to handle a gun, despite the fact that she's a firearms instructor, which means that she can't make a living either. Now, if there's any Second Amendment organizations who would like to help with legal costs, please contact me, and I'll be sure to pass that along to Krysta. I'm sure she would appreciate any financial support that was available. Be sure to check out the show notes at concealedwisconsin.com for episode 8 to find out how you can donate to Krysta's legal defense. I'll have a link to PayPal and also her attorney's address on the page so that you can donate to her. And even a small amount like $10 or $20 would go a long way if enough people did that. And thus far, she's still unable to teach her classes, which you can imagine just really puts a hole in her pocket when it comes to paying her bills. Okay, so the last item on the show before we get to our interview with Michael Martin, I want to give a quick update on the Castle Doctrine, which this is breaking news even from the interview I did with Michael Martin. Governor Walker signed the bill into law yesterday, December 7th, 2011. And so it's breaking news. This law was signed very recently. And I'm going to give just kind of a general update on what the law says, written from an article in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. And it'll have a little bit of not a humorous side, but a sad side to it because of the ending. But here's what the Sentinel said. Homeowners who shoot intruders will have new legal protections under a bill signed by Governor Walker Wednesday. The Republican governor also signed legislation to limit attorney fees in lawsuits, a bill that conservatives say would end frivolous lawsuits and which Democrats said would also end lawsuits with merit. I don't have an opinion on that. I'm not pro-lawyer when it comes to how much money they make, but I think lawyers are necessary for what we do in our society. My personal thought. Under the Intruders Bill, courts in most criminal and civil matters would presume that people using deadly force had acted reasonably against anyone unlawfully inside their residence, business, or vehicle, whether a trespasser was armed or not. The proposal is sometimes known as the Castle Doctrine, a reference to saying that one's home is one's castle. The bill passed the Senate and Assembly in a bipartisan vote back in November. Walker said in a statement and I quote, "By signing the Castle Doctrine into law, I'm standing with those individuals who choose to protect their family and property." Amen to that, Governor Walker. We appreciate that. And here's the sad part. While a group with the State Bar of Wisconsin, representing more than 600 criminal defense lawyers, prosecutors, judges, and academics, oppose the Castle Doctrine bill because here's what they actually said: malevolent, reckless, or paranoid people who shoot trick-or-treaters or repairmen on their porch will be presumed to be acting in self-defense. I can't believe that they actually put that into print, and someone actually said that. Unbelievable. But this is what's coming from the people who just got a limit placed on the amount that they can charge people in these lawsuits. And if they don't have a bias, I don't know what it is. But anyway, I'll continue. Members of that group say they can't come up with a single case where a homeowner was charged with a crime for defending himself or herself against an intruder. It may just be me, but I think, this is my personal opinion, that criminal defense lawyers, prosecutors, judges, and academics have a little bias when it comes to their opinion on this matter, especially when there's a new limit on the amounts that they can charge in a lawsuit. Now, at this point, I want to play a video that I just found online, and I will just say that this video is exactly why I think it is very important that we have the Castle Doctrine here in Wisconsin. So here's this video.
He's banging on the window? Okay. I got a gun. I'm going to get my gun out. Ma'am, what are you arming yourself with? Oh, God, I just bought it. It's a 38.
Alone in her Reading home, 66-year-old Donna Hopper goes through highs and lows on the call as she grabs her gun and watches a strange man trying to get in through her bedroom window. Sobbing and shaken, the operator works to keep Hopper calm as Reading police rush to the scene. Hopper fires 2 shots, but it's not enough to scare him off. Next are the terrifying moments that change Donna's life and end another.
Like, oh, he's coming back. I can see his shadow. Okay, where is he at? Donna, just a minute. He's coming into my front yard. Oh, God, he's coming through the window. I'm going to shoot him again. No, ma'am, don't. Where is he? Right there. I'm going to shoot him. Okay. Ma'am, listen, the officers in the area. I don't want you to fire your gun. He's coming through the window. Rain, hurry up. He's coming in. Is he coming into the house? Yes. I got him. You shot him again? Yes. Or you shot at him? No, I shot him a third. He's coming through the window. I shot him 3 shots. Oh, my God. He's on the ground.
The suspect, 37-year-old Jessie Theus, was shot. With police on the way, the operator tries to reassure her. She tells her to put her gun down, go to the front of the house, and wait. But as Hopper walks toward Theus's body, she becomes overwhelmed all over again.
In the spare bedroom? Yes, I'm standing in the front, and I see lights coming. Oh. Can you walk to the front door? Yes. Oh, God. I hope it's somebody I know. Oh, got it.
All right. Well, that's a very sad story to have to pass along, but it's a great example of what the Castle Doctrine protects. It's going to protect Donna from a lawsuit from a liberal judge in Reading, from a liberal DA or judge or whoever in Reading, California, where guns are not naturally associated with protecting oneself, but they're usually considered criminal type things, and it's going to protect her. And if Wisconsin did not pass the Castle Doctrine and have it signed into law, you would be second guessed potentially by district attorney, prosecutors, and anybody else who might be able to throw a little bit of shadow of doubt into your actions. And here's what I posted on Facebook in regards to this video. Basically, I said it's an unbelievable video, a great example of the physical and emotional trauma that happens when you shoot someone. Unfortunately, many victims can remain victims even after they've done the right thing by protecting themselves with a gun. Yet another reason for the Castle Doctrine being a vital part of law. People like Donna don't need a DA and prosecutor second-guessing their every move and everything that she did in this scenario. They need to protect her rights as a homeowner, as a law-abiding citizen, and a person who is 66 years old and unable to fight off someone crawling through her window. If she didn't have a gun, those police officers were not there to stop that intruder. What could have happened? What would have happened to her when he got into that house? He was not deterred by gunfire. He was not deterred by her words. And he certainly would not have been deterred by her fist. A gun was the only thing that could have stopped him and did stop him. And she should never have to feel guilty. And I'm sure she will, because she seems like a person that really did not want to do that, but unfortunately had no choice. So the Castle Doctrine has passed. We applaud our governor. We want to protect our governor as he goes through these recalls. And I hope that you will stand with him as he is being forced to basically run again, which is going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to detract from the things that are happening inside of Wisconsin that are good. And unfortunately, when and if he does face that recall, if he's on the losing side of that, we very may well see changes in this law, because the people who are coming up behind him who want to take over the governorship, believe me, they do not support concealed carry. They do not consider it a viable law. They think that it is a terrible law, and they want to take those rights away from you. So moving along, I want to thank you, and I'm going to go right into the interview with Michael Martin. And joining me on the phone is Michael Martin, and he is the author of Concealed Carry Fundamentals, and he's a Minnesota resident, proponent of concealed carry and training expert. But I was introduced to Michael Martin's work in my concealed carry class in Minnesota. When I took the class, I received the Minnesota Permit to Carry Firearm Fundamentals book as my textbook. And I've read through this a number of times. I've got it all marked up and think that it is one of the best books out there. And reached out to Michael to see if he'd be interested in coming on the show, being that he's a neighbor to Wisconsin, and he was gracious enough to do that. So welcome to the show, Michael, and why don't you take a second just to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Andy. Thanks for the introduction and invitation to join you on the show. As you said, I've written a couple books. The first book I actually wrote was one from Minnesota called Minnesota Permit to Carry Firearm Fundamentals. That actually started because I was an instructor here in Minnesota. I started teaching through one of the organizations here in Minnesota, but that actually evolved after I got my own permit here in Minnesota, and I'll maybe describe that a little bit later. So the first book that came out was the Minnesota book, and that really took off here in Minnesota. From that evolved a national book called Concealed Carry Fundamentals, and from that we actually spawned off a custom version for Gander Mountain. In fact, Wisconsin has a couple Gander Mountain academies that your residents can go to. So if they do stop by one of those stores, they're actually going to see a branded book called Basic Handgun and Concealed Carry Fundamentals that you can pick up as part of a class or pick up while you're visiting a store. I'd love to say this is my only job, but I've got a few other things I do here in Minnesota. I'm also a part-time firefighter and EMT for my city of Woodbury, Minnesota, and have a fantastic family that you'll actually see when you flip through the book. My wife, Sarah, and my two little boys, Jack and Sam.
They're part of the photo montage of action photos.
They are, and sometimes they were great actors and actresses, and other times it was a little hard to get them back in front of the camera. But I think we ended up with some fantastic pictures that I think tell a real good story, not only about some of the reasons why I chose to carry, but maybe it may tell a story for some other people who are a little unsure about whether concealed carry permit is right for them. My hope is that our story, and some of those pictures might help them make up their mind.
Yeah. That's one thing that I really appreciated about your book. Actually, I'm a visual type of guy. I do like to read when it's an enjoyable topic, and I've actually gone through your book twice, which, like I told you before, my wife thinks I'm a little bit of an overachiever. But once for the class, I read through it after the class was done. Obviously, in the 8-hour class, you don't read the book; you just go through it with the instructor. But I read through it afterwards, and then in preparation for Wisconsin's concealed carry law passing, I went through it again. And, the fact that there's pictures really helps. It's a visual aid for me as a visual learner, but also the reading was enjoyable as well. And I can tell you from college days, I haven't read a whole lot of books. I'm much more of a listener. That's why I do a podcast, is because I'm much more of a listening type person. I can go through business books and different books on my iPod. But this is a book that I think anybody could sit down and really sink their teeth into and get a lot of great information for not only Minnesota, but if you're, well, actually, we should probably talk about that since Wisconsin is bringing this new law into effect and people are getting their concealed permit licenses for Wisconsin. You're actually going to be putting out a supplement to your book that specifically deals with Wisconsin law. Why don't you take us down that road?
That sounds great. That's exactly right. So we did talk about the national book I have called Concealed Carry Fundamentals. That's actually in its first edition, although because all these books are interrelated, that book was about the fourth iteration of the releases that I had done. Now, this new book, the second edition of the national book, we're slightly modifying the title to reflect some new content we have in there. The new title is going to be Concealed Carry and Home Defense Fundamentals. The reality is the book's already had a lot of good information about topics around home defense, including the legal use of force inside the home, and, of course, all the topics on situational awareness and the color codes of awareness and conflict avoidance and all those things didn't just apply outside the home. But we also added some new content specific to home defense. So that book can really be used nationally anywhere, in any national course. Any national reader might want to pick that up. But I did want to hit Wisconsin law specifically. I've learned quite a bit about the concealed carry law in Wisconsin over the last couple months, and everything I've read is great. There's a lot of good information out there from private sources and from the Department of Justice. But as an example, with some information from the Department of Justice, I think the FAQ they have, the Frequently Asked Questions document, has about 70 pages in it. It's full of great information, but some of that information is repeated. Some is written in a little bit more of a legal language, as opposed to just common English. And, of course, there's no pictures or illustrations to go along with it. So my development right now is to produce about a 25 to 30-page Wisconsin supplement that we would sell with the national book, so you'd get a complete Wisconsin package, and that could, again, be used by any Wisconsin instructor, or could just be picked up by a person in Wisconsin who is interested to learn not only about gear and things around conflict avoidance and personal protection plans, but also things specific to Wisconsin. For example, how do you apply? Where do you apply? Where can you carry? Where can't you carry? What are the restrictions on certain things around carry, and so on. So that should be out by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think that's great information, and I certainly will look forward to getting a new copy of your book as well. You know, one of the things that is unique about Wisconsin versus Minnesota requires training, and for Minnesota that works perfectly. In Wisconsin, we made a very vague training requirement. It's required, but the Department of Justice wanted to slap a time frame 4 hours on it, and then that was retracted. So it's kind of this flux period, and then you have one of the requirements that will meet that, or one of the things that will fulfill that requirement, is hunter safety, which really has nothing to do with carrying a concealed weapon per se.
Right.
And so there's a lot of people out there who probably use their hunter safety card to get the license, but they're not fully equipped yet, and they're looking for some additional training, some additional information. And of course, I would encourage people to get out there, get the training that you need, whether it's getting a book like yours, taking a class, finding a more self-defense type of class over a concealed carry class. That's one thing I think is lacking. I feel pretty confident with my understanding of concealed carry, but I'd like to sharpen my skills or sharpen the saw a little bit and actually do some additional training that isn't necessarily found around here. So,
sure, right.
If you don't have 20 acres, which I do, where I can go out in the backyard and shoot the gun without a lot of issues, you're going to be stuck with just the training that you get, which might be minimal. So very much encourage people to get a hold of this book and take a look through it. It's not, I don't want to say it's an easy read, but it's an interesting read, and it captures your attention, and the pictures are fantastic.
And I appreciate that. And like you, I learn visually, so one of the things that I have a lot of fun with when I write a new topic in the book or I edit part of the book is the first thing I want to think about is how would I visually demonstrate a certain topic. And I even do that on the topics like the law that you might think are just going to be the written word. And one of the reasons I do it that way is I think about the way I teach. When I'm teaching, I'm standing in front of a classroom and I'm either demonstrating something myself or I'm showing a product or I'm maybe even acting out a certain topic. People learn visually. The written word doesn't always impart that same amount of knowledge. So when I think of a new topic, whether it's point shooting or focusing on the front sight or looking at a certain stance, I think about what's the way I would show that visually first, and then I wrap the words around that. I wrap the text around it to explain that, whatever that illustration is they're looking at. I've heard some great comments on that, and that really helps me kind of move on with what the additional or the new topics are. So for this Wisconsin supplement, for example, there's a lot of really dry language we could talk about in the book, but we'll have some illustrations in there and some good graphics to help explain those topics to make the read a little more interesting as people are trying to learn about, what's this Wisconsin concealed carry law all about.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I asked you permission for when I first contacted you was I would like to go through parts of your book on part of my show and just cover some of the training topics. And so that was kind of my initial idea is using your book as a resource to spur that conversation and get people interested in carry. But we could talk about training and things like that for 8 hours. I mean, that's how long it took me to go through mine. I'm more interested at this point just talking about why a guy like yourself, who obviously has an interest in guns, why did you get this involved in guns where you're writing books and you're carrying a concealed weapon on a daily basis? I mean, what's that all about? What was your motivation for that?
The motivation is different than what most people might guess. Most people might guess that I've been an advocate for years, and people might think I had some situation that happened in my life where, maybe we were robbed, and none of that happened. In fact, my wife and I were living in California when the big debate was happening here in Minnesota about our permit to carry law, so that really wasn't on my radar when it was occurring. We moved back to Minnesota in late 2002, so as the law went into effect, it was a little bit below my radar. I just didn't think a lot about it. Now, I'd been around guns forever. I grew up as a Cub Scout and Boy Scout, so we've been around guns because of that. I was in the military for 7 years, so had some familiarity with AR-15s and so on. And I got a little involved in some sport shooting, but I didn't really think about concealed carry until a really subtle thing started happening in my life. Mm-hmm. I mentioned my little boys are pictured in the book. The little subtle change happened for me when my oldest son was just about a year old. In fact, he was a little younger than a year. And it was as simple as putting him in the car one day. I started thinking about this, and I realized that if something happened, whether it was a medical emergency or a violent crime that might occur, it really started dawning on me that I had to think of myself as the first responder for the family, and certainly for my kids. So I started thinking about the topic and talking to some of my brothers and brothers-in-law about it, and we decided to go take a permit to carry course here in Minnesota. And I learned a lot, but it still took a little while for me to become comfortable with carrying and let that subtle feeling kind of grow inside of me. And now it's second nature. When I'm out with my family or out by myself, It's just second nature to have the gun on my side, and I don't think of it as something that I am going to use to shoot a bad guy. I use it, I think about it no differently than I think about, what I would do if one of my little boys suddenly got a major gash and they were going to bleed to death unless I did something about it, or if my wife suddenly grabbed her chest and collapsed on the ground with a heart attack. It's those little tiny things that I know I have to be able to do to fill in the gap between when an event occurs and when first responders show up. And I can actually play off of that a little bit as a firefighter here in Woodbury. I realize what can happen in the few minutes between when someone calls 911 and when the big engines roll up, or the law enforcement cars and SUVs pull up. A lot can happen. Houses can burn down, people can die, and if a family, especially the parents, if they're well educated on what they can do to protect themselves and their families, they can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
So that really became the reasons why I decided to carry. And then I realized there had to be more people like me out there, people that just hadn't been around this advocacy for years. So I started teaching on the side. And my real goal with the students I wanted to bring in were people who just didn't have a comfort level with guns and didn't have a familiarity. So I started teaching classes that included a basic handgun familiarization. And as funny as it was, I realized I just didn't find a good book out there that I could use to impart the knowledge that I wanted to share. So I started developing a pretty detailed PowerPoint that I would then print off and leave behind. And at some point I realized, I'm part way to having a book done. So my first couple editions of the book weren't really much more than detailed PowerPoints that I would print off and bind. And, at that point I realized I can make this thing really a professional level book. So I hired a great designer and hired a couple of photographers and illustrators, and we pulled this thing together in the third edition for Minnesota, and that became the national edition. And now it's become nearly a full-time job. This is really something that takes up a big part of my day. Yeah.
So it's put out by Key House Press, which I assume is your own publishing company.
That is me. Yes, I figured we'd come up with a name there that I would use other than my training organization name, which is Minnesota Tactics. And I don't think I've told many people about this, but that name Key House actually has a little romance behind it. My wife and I were married in Key West, and we stayed at a hotel called the Ocean Key House. So my wife came up with the name Key House Press. So if you didn't think I had any romantic bones in my body, my wife would argue differently.
I'm sure she appreciates that. One of the pictures, you talk about the pictures, and we go back to the visual learning. One of the pictures that really stood out for me is right in the introduction, and it's a picture of you as a father. It's a black and white picture, so people have to imagine this, but it's a black and white picture, and the only color in the picture is your sidearm and your holster. But it's a picture of you carrying a two-year-old son, and he looks like he's about my kid's age, about 6-7 years old.
That's exactly right. He would have been 6 years old in that picture.
So son's walking, you're holding his hand, and in the other arm you've got a picture of your son. You're walking down a road. And from what I understand from the picture, I think I read it, or maybe you said it, it was not a set-up picture. It was just you were walking with your son, and the photographer happened to be snapping some photos, and it just turned out perfect.
I was kind of struggling with the introduction, and you'd think you'd write the introduction to a book first, and that, for me, tends to be one of the last things I update. I was struggling with explaining to readers how to answer the question, why do you carry a gun, if you were ever asked. And I was really trying to think this through, and I'll let you finish, and I'll kind of explain how I came across this photograph.
Yeah, as I look at this, I have 4 kids, and 7 to 3 months old, and every time I get in the car and I fasten those seatbelts, and I take the time to make sure that they're safe. Right. But then we drive down to where the in-laws live in Minnesota, and we get out to go to a restaurant or whatever. You think about all the preparation you do for your kids, and yet crime happens every single day. And we could get into the statistics and things. You lay all that out in the book, but you're more likely to be affected by a violent crime than you are for a lot of the things that people think of that are so dangerous, like fires and
exactly right.
Getting hit by a car, things like that. I mean, violent crime is is very, very rampant inside of the United States, and even in a place in the Midwest like Wisconsin or Minnesota. It's statistically going up. In fact, I found a website recently that listed the statistics from like 1962 to 2000. I think it was 8 or 9, and amazing how quickly the statistics for violent encounters went up. I was just shocked, and I put that on Facebook, and everybody was commenting, "Wow, that we do not live in a very safe environment anymore." And as a first responder, it's like you are the first line of defense because you're not going to have a police officer with you 24 hours a day.
That's right, and it'd be very fair to say I don't have firearms for home defense, and I don't carry for personal protection outside the home because crime is rampant in my neighborhood any more than I have smoke alarms and fire extinguishers in my home because house fires are rampant in my neighborhood. It's no different than life insurance or other things that you use to protect yourself from those however unlikely or likely things that can happen in your life. And that's why I was a little concerned when I first started writing the book that I didn't have a big story to tell. A lot of people who've written books like this are police officers and have life and death stories to tell, or they might have been a person who was a victim of violent crime and had a really good story to tell, and I didn't have that. So, back to the picture you described, I was trying to think of how do I describe to the average mom or dad out there, the average husband or wife who might be thinking about protecting their family, no different than they think about protecting their kids when they buckle them into the car. And I was struggling with this a little bit. And as you mentioned, I had a whole series of photographs taken on one day by Oleg Volk, who some of your listeners, a lot of your listeners might know. He's done a lot of great Second Amendment posters. So Oleg was up in town, and we had a whole series of photographs we were taking. And it was a long day. My kids were kind of wearing out. And at the end of the day, we were just walking back home. And I didn't realize Oleg was still taking pictures behind us. And as I looked at the pictures of that day, when I got to the series of photographs where Oleg was taking the shots from behind, so you couldn't really see my face, but you could see my 2-year-old's face looking over my shoulder, and my 6-year-old was kind of dragging his feet, holding my hand on the right. I honestly got a little choked up looking at that picture because it suddenly struck me back to the original reason why I thought about carrying. This is why I carry. I carry because of these kids. I don't carry because a gun is cool or because there's a lot of great gear I get to buy. I carry no differently for no different reasons than learning about other ways to protect my family. I carry because I want to get home safe at night. And I have home defense guns because I want to be safe when I'm in my home. So that picture, I hope strikes a chord with readers of the book. In fact, that picture's on my website at keyhousepress.com. Mm-hmm. There's a tab that kind of describes us a little bit, and that picture's on there, so hopefully that resonates with people that might be thinking about this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great reminder of one reason that you should carry, and as I think about people that are just getting their license, and my last episode I titled it "Where's My License?" and I still haven't gotten my license, and so hopefully today when I get back home, my wife will say, finally you can quit asking me to go check the mail. But as I think about the people who either have gotten training or maybe don't have enough training for their comfort level, one of the things in your book that you talk about that is key is a personal protection plan, and it includes situational awareness, and you include the color codes that have been used by many gun trainers for years. But talk a little bit about a personal protection plan. What do people need to know now that we can carry concealed? What would be a smart thing for them to think of before they encounter a situation?
That's a great question. And situational awareness, developing a personal protection plans, all those things have nothing to do with guns. They've got nothing to do with whether you got a concealed carry permit or not. But they become ultra important if you are going to get a permit because what you do if you're involved in a violent situation, what you do and what you did leading up to that situation is going to be scrutinized by the district attorney, by the police, by the media, and anything that you may have done that could have instigated that situation, or anything you could have done to have avoided a situation that you didn't do is going to be analyzed very, very closely. So, the ideas around developing a personal protection plan is just looking at everything in your life. Are you doing things to make yourself safer, or are you doing things to put yourself in harm's way? Now, there's certainly a gray area there. Someone might argue that I've got a perfect right to walk down that alley. I've got a perfect right to shop at that store in the neighborhood that might have higher crime. It's my right, and that's absolutely true. But you've also got to live with the fallout if something happens that you could have done to avoid. And I've been in some minor situations where if something just didn't feel right or smell right, I backed myself out of the situation. And the truth is I probably overreacted, and I can certainly live with that. One simple example was at the Mall of America, a huge mall in Bloomington, Minnesota. My family was at the mall one night, and as we were leaving about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, we started walking out into the parking garage that's huge and, of course, doesn't have security everywhere. And there were a handful of guys kind of milling around 100 feet out or so, and I felt uncomfortable about the situation. So I said to my wife, let's go back in the mall for a minute. And she didn't really question me, but I explained, we got back in there, and we ended up walking out a different exit a few minutes later. Minor thing, but I'd much rather be in a situation where I've got to back out of a possible situation than walk, headlong into a situation where I have to pull my gun out and, either expose it or ultimately use it, and then I've got to explain, why I didn't follow a different path. The color codes, like you mentioned, they've been around since the Marines in World War II, and of course, Jeff Cooper kind of refined those for the way we teach civilians in classes, and they're great. One of the things I did in the book is put some visuals in there to show a little bit more about the topic and explain why we do that and what it really means to have a 360-degree awareness of our surroundings. And one other thing that I comment on, and you and I have talked about a little bit already, if I don't have a permit, if I don't carry a gun, I might find myself in a situation where I become a victim of violent crime, regardless of whether I've had situational awareness or not. If I'm carrying a gun, I've got to always be in a constant state of yellow. I've got to know what's around me. I can't, be stuck sending a text message on my cell phone and not be aware of what's around me, because I might find myself in a situation where I had to use my gun that I could have avoided. Now, legally, I might be okay. Morally and ethically, I've got to decide how do I feel about the situation where I may have shot another person when I might have avoided that by simply paying a little better attention to the area around me.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you talk about the Mall of America and going back inside, because I would say that many people would be oblivious to that. They would probably be checking their phone or their email or dealing with their bags or something like that. So for the majority of people who are in those situations that do turn into a crime, I would say that there's probably a pretty good chance that they weren't paying attention, and they gave up that opportunity to exit stage left instead of walk head on to a situation. So interesting.
That's right. And that's not to the last thing I want to do, and I take pains to explain this in my classes, is we're not blaming victims here, but the reality is if a bad guy's looking for a victim, they're going to be looking for someone that they can get right upon without the person seeing them. So they're going to be looking for the person who's walking along slower than the crowd, or they're going to be looking for a person who's talking on their cell phone or texting a message, or who has earphones in and is listening to some music. They're not going to be looking for a guy who's looking left and right, or a woman who's looking left and right and walking a little faster than the crowd. In fact, one comment I make in the book is, a criminal is much rather going to go after a 200-pound male who's talking on his phone or sending a text message and is oblivious to his surroundings. They're going to rather go after that person than go after a 120-pound female who's observant of her surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
The female looking around is going to notice what's happening. The bad guy's going to think, she saw me, she's going to see me coming. She's not going to be easy to approach. He'll look at a guy, regardless of how big he is. If he's not paying attention, their reaction is, I can club that guy upside the head, take his wallet, and he'll never see me coming.
Right. You talk about a few different areas for conflict avoidance, and you cover personal security, traveling in crowds, making sure that you're in the correct location. Don't take the alley versus the well-lit area. You talk about automobile security, including identity theft, which I think is important. If you leave your address book or something in your car with someone steals your purse, they get your car, they get your house. You have to think through that before it happens.
Right. And to go off of that point a little bit that I mentioned in the book, that was actually in reference to something that happened to a good friend of mine. In the book, I described not leaving anything in the car that has your home address on it, whether it be insurance card or your wallet, of course, or a purse. So the story that occurred to my friend was his wife was out at one of the local lakes around Minneapolis and parked the car and hid her purse under a blanket, and then she was out walking her twin little boy and little girl around the lake. Got back to the car and found the window had been broken and her purse was stolen, which of course was extremely upsetting. She called the police, and half an hour later she was on her way with a police report, and that wasn't the end of the story. She got home and found that the house had been broken into. So what the police assumed then and explained was the robbers broke into the car and found the home address and assumed that mom was out walking the kids around the block and dad was at work, so they broke into the house. But the scary part here was thinking about what would have happened if the reverse would have occurred. Maybe if the dad had been out running around the lake and had his ID in the car, and mom was at home with the kids, and these robbers, broke in while they were at home. So a lot of scary things can happen from very subtle mistakes, and of course, they realized that that was a pretty big error on their part. Yeah,
and I'm sure that, like many of our listeners will attest that they've stuck something under a blanket, thinking that it was some magic way to keep burglars or thieves from stealing it. You go into the next point, which is home security, locking your door even when you're home, having good exterior lighting, maybe even having an alarm system, using the alarm system. How many people have alarms and never set the alarm?
That's I actually comment on that in the new release of the book. It's 53% from insurance company statistics. It's a silly thing to do. You've got a great home security system, and yet you don't set it. So that those few sets of bullet points in the current edition, in a few pages where we talk about home security, has expanded into about 10 pages of topics all about home security. We really expanded those topics about an alarm system and even doing a self-home inspection, walking around the inside and the outside of the house to look for things that a criminal might look for. And the one thing I comment on is, as obvious as it might be, most of us, when we think about the security of our doors, really focus on that front door, getting a good solid core front door and a good deadbolt, yet most people don't even think about their sliding back door or the door that may be internal to the house between the garage and the home. So criminals are going to look for the easiest way in, and if that front door looks pretty solid, they'll go through a weak window or a weak door.
Yeah, and they're probably looking for something not in the front anyway, and something hidden in the shadows.
Exactly.
Interestingly, you talk about phone security as well, which I think is important. Make sure that I have a friend. Whenever I call over there, their 6-year-old answers the phone, and our kids aren't allowed to do that, and it's not because I'm afraid they're going to say something I'll be embarrassed about. I just don't want my kids to be the first impression that someone calling who may be interested in something in our house that they
Agreed.
get, and so that's just something that I wouldn't personally do. But every time I call, their little voice answers the phone, and half the time they don't know what to say. They pick it up before Dad gets there. So,
and if it's of course, you don't want the kid to be stuck talking to a telemarketer, but if it's someone who's interested in targeting your home, that simple question could be, I'm calling from Acme Alarm Company, little boy or little girl, do you have an alarm system in your house? And, an adult is going to be instantly suspicious and hopefully not answer that question, but, a child isn't going to know what to answer, and if they answer no, then a couple nights later, your house may be broken into.
Yeah, interesting. And then you go in depth into pre-thinking through your home defense, because although you're very likely, if you're going to be in an encounter, you could, be in an encounter outside the home, but there's a good chance that if something were to happen, it would happen in your home. And so you have a whole section on home defense and thinking through that process of just like a fire, where do we all meet outside if there's a fire to make sure we're all there, and what are the exits and that kind of thing. Well, if there's an intruder in your house, what's the layout out of your house? What's the most likely place they're going to enter? Where do you all retreat to, and draw that line in the sand to say, this is where, this is where we are going to engage, or if we can't retreat. And so I thought that was a good thing as well. One thing that you talk about that I struggle with on some level, and maybe I'm just ADD, but is the mental exercises.
That's probably it.
It probably is. My wife thinks so. So mental exercises, taking the time to think through potential scenarios, and again, sharpening that saw for potential things, not to be paranoid, but just to pre-plan for what might happen, so that when it happens, it will be a next step. Give me an example of a mental exercise that you would use.
Yeah, and one of the points I make in the book is, if you have enough time and enough money, there's any school that you want to go to. And I jokingly say in the book that if you wanted to learn how to rappel from a helicopter and breach doors, you can probably find a school that would teach you that if you had enough money. But most of us don't have the time or the money to do that. Most of us are lucky to get to the range once a month. The problem that can happen when people are on a traditional range is they'll, take 5 minutes of setup time to get everything laid out and get that gun nicely loaded and, stretch their muscles a little bit before they fire that first round down range. That's obviously not how violent encounters happen. They happen fast. They happen close. So unless you've mentally prepared yourself to walk through the kind of things that could happen during a violent encounter, you might find yourself stuck with your gun in your holster and you're flat on your back in a situation. So, a simple example of a bit of mental preparation can be done at home. You could be sitting on the couch thinking about, well, what would I do if I heard the front door being kicked down? Or what would I do if I heard the alarm go off in the middle of the night? Without that mental preparation, the average citizen might pop up in bed and think, well, what am I going to do now? But if you're mentally prepared to think, well, where is my home defense gun? How do I grab the phone? Where do I go to? What do I tell my family? What commands do I shout? Those things can help you get that mental checklist kind of built into your neural pathways when they might not otherwise. Thinking about some things outside the home, you can do mental exercises on the range. So instead of looking at that target as a paper target that you're trying to get a perfect score, you can change that mental scenario to think of that paper target as a bad guy who's charging you with a knife. And then you can even change around the scenarios a bit. One scenario might be the bad guy's charging you with a knife, you've got nowhere to retreat, and there's a concrete wall behind him. To another scenario might be there's other things behind the charging attacker that you have to really up your precision. So that scenario might take you from a balance of speed and accuracy at one level to a balance of speed and accuracy at the next level. And one comment I have in the book is there's a set of checklist items you've really got to think about. Your scenarios have to be complete. It can't be something as simple as a bad guy's charging me, I pull out my gun and I fire. You have to think through what commands might I give? Can I retreat? How do I work in the physiological reactions that are most likely going to occur to me, like tunnel vision or auditory exclusion? What do I do if I have a malfunction with my gun jams? Do I remember to disengage my safety if I've got a 1911, for example, or if I'm done shooting, do I remember to engage my decocker if I've got a double action gun? Mm-hmm. And the last points I have on the list are things that occur after an event. For example, where do I secure my gun? Where's my lawyer's contact information? What do I say to the police when they arrive on the scene? And ultimately, what do I do when I'm arrested? So those mental checklist items help you in a real situation to avoid the what Jeff Cooper calls the, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to me situation, and what I kind of describe as the, I can't believe this is what I think it is. Too many people can get stuck in that mental pause as opposed to taking action. So those mental exercises can help you take, that set of checklists off paper and kind of file it away in your brain and use it if an event actually occurs.
Yeah. I have this envisioned, all these new concealed carry people that are going out to buy their firearm, and it's winter coming up, and they're probably not going to go to the range very much, but it's this new cool thing that they want to have with them. And I just have this horrible view of people who are out there carrying, but they've never even shot their gun, or they've shot it one or two times. They're not familiar with the decocker or the safety and things like that. The average person probably doesn't shoot it enough, but if you're not shooting it at all or very minimally, you're going to be that much more likely to fumble when you're trying to score. So just things to think about. And then you said the lawyer contact information in the back of the book. You have, for the Minnesota one, you have a specific lawyer with some cards.
Right.
I've shared those on Facebook. I have them in my wallet. I've mentally thought through that process, what I would and wouldn't say, who I would call first, all those things that are important. But most importantly, during that situation, I fired my gun and pulled it from my holster and put it back in my holster. And I've done that a number of times, enough where I feel like I could do it with my eyes closed without shooting myself in the foot. And that's so important.
And that's part of what I write about is how what most people would describe as muscle memory, how that actually works in the brain. And of course, our muscles don't have memory. That recognition and being able to repeat things happens in the cerebellum, and it doesn't happen because you've read a book one time or because you've gone to the range one time or taken a 4, 6, or 8 hour class. It happens because you're repeatedly doing these things. And as you described, it's not only about the physical things that you might do, like taking a gun out of the holster, disengaging a safety, squeezing the trigger, and putting it back in the holster. It's also those other things to think about. Now, what do I do next? What are the exact things I know I'm going to say because I've rehearsed this in my mind a bunch of times? And where is my lawyer's information? What do I do when I'm sitting at the police station if that ultimately occurs? Too often, people have gotten their permits and don't take it any further than that. And if some event occurs, whether it's them firing the gun or they're them exposing the gun because they felt threatened, if an arrest occurs, the average person is going to spill their guts and say things that they maybe shouldn't say, and that can all be used against them, as of course we all know from dozens of police shows on TV. So I think I'm attuned enough where not only would I be able to do the mechanics of getting a gun out, firing it, putting it back in the holster, reloading, clearing a malfunction, and those type of things, but I know I've embedded these things in my brain enough that I would automatically know what to say to the police. I would automatically know who to call and what to do, or at least I'd like to think I know. Until a violent encounter occurs, I guess you don't really know exactly what's going to occur.
Yeah, it's amazing how on CSI everybody spills their guts. Nobody ever says, "I want my lawyer," which should be your first response is, no comment until I have a lawyer with me. But
my wife and I joke about that same thing, the CSI effect.
No, it's just, and you get to that point. Well, and I think a lot of people, because the police don't volunteer that you don't really have, they give you read your rights, but that goes by you pretty fast, and especially if you've been through an encounter, you almost feel like you have to. A police officer stops you. You mind if I take a look in your car? Well, you feel like you're being naughty if you say no, instead of saying no. You don't have, you get a warrant. You're not gonna, you can't just come and barge in here. This isn't Nazi Germany. You don't have the right.
Agreed.
So just things to think about beforehand, and certainly if they have probable cause, they're going to search your car anyway. But don't give them probable cause, and be polite and make sure you're obeying the speed limit and stay away from places that are going to get you in trouble.
And we had to kind of go off the topic. We talked a little bit about what might people be able to do besides just go through those mental exercises. There's a lot of things the average person can go through, whether they're from Wisconsin or Minnesota or whatever. And there's a lot of good information out there in books and online that you can read just to learn about certain topics. But there's a lot of things that you can do beyond going to the range and sitting or standing in a 3 by 3 foot box and firing down range. There's some great advanced courses out there, like one of my favorites is what Rob Pincus does with his CFS course, the Combat Focused Shooting class. It's absolutely fantastic. It ties in everything that you have to think about, whether it's movement, shoot, no-shoot situations, a great set of points where you have to balance speed versus accuracy for different types of things. Absolutely wonderful. If you can't get out to one of those, as I mentioned, there's a couple new ranges in Wisconsin at Gander Mountains called Gander Mountain Academy. One of the things they have at the academies are 300-degree virtual simulators with high-definition video. What that lets you do is you're standing in the center of this action, and instead of having about a 30-degree window where you can fire downrange, you've got nearly 360 degrees around you where action can occur. So during these virtual simulations, a bad guy can approach from the front or the rear or both. You might be engaging a guy to the front, and all of a sudden you hear gunfire to your right or your left, and you realize you weren't paying attention to what's around you. So those things help build those pathways in the brain to realize I've got to do a lot more than just take the gun off the bench rest in front of me, fire a few rounds downrange, and consider myself fully trained or fully qualified.
Do you know where those are located in Wisconsin? Or are they?
Yeah, so there's La Crosse and Madison, I think, are the two locations, and they're my understanding is their expectation is to add more of those across the country. There are, I think, 6 open right now. And in fact, I was just down at the one in Lakeville, Minnesota yesterday. They're beautiful facilities, and the truth is they're going to attract people who haven't been around guns a lot. The average person who might be uncomfortable or a little nervous about walking into a traditional gun range can walk into a Gander Mountain Academy, and it looks beautiful. It smells nice. It's looks like something out of one of the CSI shows, something very high tech and clean. And I think the average mom or dad who's never been in a gun shop or gun range in their life would have no problem walking in there. And the truth is those virtual simulations, in addition to teaching you something, they're also fun. It's something that you can go out to at lunch with some buddies, and you realize not only are you learning something, but you're having a little bit of fun as well. So in addition to the virtual simulators, they've got live ranges as well, so people who want to bring their handguns or whatever can get some real trigger time as well. Right.
So the virtual simulators, they provide the gun, and it's something that registers the shots and things?
It's exactly right. It's a modified Glock, and it does have a near full felt recoil. So when you squeeze the trigger, you'll feel the gun move in your hands. You've got to reload. There's no such thing as endless magazines like a Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. So you've got to reload. You've got to engage different targets, and of course, in the real world, you can lose in one of these scenarios, which doesn't happen when you're just shooting at a paper target. So I absolutely encourage people to, if they're in La Crosse or Madison, take a trip to the academies, and if you're anywhere nearby, take a drive out to check them out.
Yeah, as a kid, we used to go to splat ball type weekends and take a day out to the splat ball course or whatever. And as an adult, that might be a good fun guys weekend or something.
The one thing that I remember from doing splat ball myself is it taught me not necessarily about how to better aim a gun or trigger press. It taught me about cover.
Yeah.
I'd be behind a tree and I'd think I've got perfect cover, and somebody nailed me from the side, and I thought, this isn't cover at all. I'm fully exposing my leg or my arm, and I just got hit. So as enjoyable and as non-technical as something like that might feel, it's teaching you about movement, cover, a lot of things that can be used in real life.
Yeah, vulnerability. Right. No, that's highly recommended to get more training that way. The last thing I want to talk about, there's an organization in Wisconsin called WAVE. It's Wisconsin Anti-Violence Effort. It's an anti-gun organization.
Right.
And basically, they just take every possible opportunity to slam the gun community, people that carry guns, and they're real active right now because it's a brand new law and things like that. Now, Wisconsin just passed their law, and it's gone into effect 30 days now. But Minnesota's had this law for 8-9 years since 2003. What can we expect from Wisconsin. Right now a lot of businesses are posting those signs because it's a reflex and they feel like that's just the right thing to do. Did it cool down in Minnesota? And before you answer that, one of the things people always say, if you're carrying a gun, something bad's going to happen. But as I look in your book, it talks about the permit holders and crime. And if there's 10,000 DWI arrests, there's this little tiny sliver of people who are permit holders that get arrested for that. If there's an assault arrest, there's this even smaller amount of people, 1.6 per 10,000 will be someone that actually has a permit. So as I look at those statistics, actually people who go get a permit are way less likely to be in trouble with the law. They're the law-abiding citizens, which is kind of part of our whole thing. So it's a false assumption that if I'm carrying a gun and I walk into the public library, that suddenly I'm going to go OK Corral on people and start shooting it up. Rather, the opposite is different, that chances are I'm not going to steal any books as well while I'm in there because I'm a law-abiding citizen, and the fact that I went through the process. So talk about that in Minnesota, and we'll close with that, because I think we're experiencing this negative media and negative things from WAVE and other organizations, and it just feels overwhelming. Plus, we have this great political system over here where we're recalling everybody. And it's just very negative right now. So the fact that we passed this bill is another reason to recall our governor, which, Governor Walker's awesome. But talk about what happened in Minnesota and what can we expect?
And I'll tell you, I would expect the same thing to happen here in Wisconsin. And if you think about, the hullabaloo that happened when the law was first being debated and when it was passed and signed, it was in the news, almost daily. But the fact that it's become law now, the news is going to start to drop off. Now, guys like you and I, who are advocates and we read blogs and we read forums all the time and so on, we might think that the news is still really out there. You're going to pay attention to what WAVE says. But the truth is unless WAVE is in the news, the average citizen in Wisconsin is going to stop thinking about this. And now the other great news is so many people have applied for permits in Wisconsin. You guys have eclipsed us when it comes to how many people have applied within the first 30 days.
It's
very quickly in Wisconsin. Yeah, very quickly in Wisconsin, neighbors are going to know neighbors who have permits, coworkers are going to know coworkers, and relatives are going to know relatives who have permits, and they're going to realize the person signing up for these permits isn't the demonized person or the kind of person that the media might portray as the kind of guy who wants to go out and get a gun. So it's going to happen over time. My belief is in Wisconsin, the news is going to drop off. People are going to stop paying attention to WAVE. WAVE's contributions are going to drop off. Their volunteers are going to drop off. Our anti-gun movement in Minnesota is literally operating on fumes. It just doesn't exist anymore because it's not in the news. Nothing bad happens. We're bouncing around about 90,000 permit holders in Minnesota, and it's just out of the news. The event that occurred in Minneapolis not too long ago, where a permit holder did shoot a violent felon, that was in the news for a few days, and it's disappeared. It's just a non-event at this point. But one of the things that I always like encouraging people to do is your grassroots efforts don't have to be something bold. They don't have to be, carrying a gun openly and trying to draw people into conversation. It could be something as simple as inviting your neighbor's kids out to go shoot a BB gun. Have people realize there's nothing to fear with guns. And the truth is law-abiding people, when they do educate others on guns, teach people about gun safety. We don't teach people how to shoot stop signs. We teach people about the 4 universal safety rules. And even people who've never been around guns might realize this is a pretty simple thing to learn, and safety rules are all built into it. And as you said, that I describe these statistics in my book. People applying for permits are already the cream of the crop. Those numbers are reflected in a couple annual reports that come out of the Minnesota BCA. I've seen some similar numbers out of Texas. It demonstrates that permit holders not only are not out doing dumb things with their guns, they're not out doing traditional crimes like getting DWIs or getting involved in drug crimes. And it's almost laughable how law-abiding citizens are that get their permits versus non-permit holders. In fact, let me look at a statistic here. One real simple one is looking at DWIs. A permit holder in Minnesota is 14 times less likely than a non-permit holder to get a DWI, and they are 19 times less likely to be charged with a drug crime. Now, that doesn't mean that dumb people went and got their permit and suddenly they become law-abiding citizens. It means that people that care enough about personal protection and home protection, that are going through these classes and reading this material and getting a permit, they are the cream of the crop. They're not going to go out and do dumb things. So, you hate to jump forward 8 or 9 years in Wisconsin to see what it's like, but if you jump forward 12 months from now, my guess is it's going to be a non-event in the news. You guys may be double or triple where you're at with the number of permit holders, and a lot of people will be talking about this at a grassroots level, talking to their coworkers about why they got a permit or talking to their relatives about why they got it. And, hopefully this recall movement will blow away, and we'll keep Walker in office for a number of years, and keep other good changes occurring, like the enhanced castle doctrine.
Right. Well, hey, we're talking to Michael Martin. He's the author of several books, including Concealed Carry Fundamentals, and he's got a new book coming out very soon with a Wisconsin supplement to it that if you're a concealed permit or licensed trainer and would be interested in using his material for your class, you can get in contact with him. His information will be on the show notes for this episode number 8, and you can find out where to get in contact with him, or just do a Google search on Michael Martin and the Concealed Carry Fundamentals. He's got a lot of great stuff. He's right over in Minnesota, and it's been an honor to chat with you today about Wisconsin's new law being the 49th state to finally get concealed carry, and it's been a lot of fun to chat with you, and I think we went a little bit over time. Got a little carried away.
Appreciate the invitation, Andy, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode, and I want to thank you for listening to Concealed Wisconsin's podcast. Again, please check out the show notes for this episode of Concealed Wisconsin and visit all the links mentioned to see how you can get more involved. Concealed Wisconsin is a unique online community, and we encourage you to become part of it. Head on over to concealedwisconsin.com and leave us a comment, become a fan on Facebook, or subscribe to us on YouTube. Remember, you can always listen online, download it to your computer, or take us on the go by subscribing on iTunes. Check out all the links at concealedwisconsin.com. Thanks for listening. Now get out there and carry on.